Thank you for recording. That was one of my notes I was going to say, is that for everybody, we're going to be recording this meeting. Before we jump into the presentations here with Tri-Hydro and introductions, just wanted to start by thanking everybody this morning for lending us your time and being part of this process. You've all been invited to this process because of your vast knowledge on the subject matter and wastewater facilities here in Teton County. I should have started with introduction. I'm Chris Colligan. I'm the project manager for the water quality master planning effort here for Teton County in Public Works. We started this planning effort about a year ago, and we're in partnership with Town of Jackson, Protect Our Waters, Jackson Hole, and the Teton Conservation District. Our project team has met for the last year bi-weekly, and working with Tri-Hydro and Flitner Strategies to help develop this process. Our first year was focused on data gathering and all of the vulnerability assessment phase. And now we are moving on to the stakeholder process. We are using this stakeholder engagement to define what we want the future to look like 20 years from now in this plan, and what mitigation tools that we might evaluate through this process. And we want to stress that this is a stakeholder-driven process with our partners that is meant to be transparent, that has many opportunities for public involvement. And we encourage you to remain engaged and participate in the process. Thanks for being here today, this morning, and maybe hand it back to Sarah for a round of introductions. Oh, Sarah, you're on mute.
I just can't believe that can still happen. The same mistake twice a day, even 3 years later. Many of you did the round of intros yesterday, so feel free to be brief. First, I just want to pause and give you all a minute to just collect your thoughts and take a deep breath and allow yourself to be focused on this meeting and this group of people. And that's something you can do every single meeting for the rest of the day. It takes mental fitness to gather your attention, and this is going to be a couple of hours of focusing on some dense data. So I just want to give you a chance to do that. Ashley on my team, so I should say, for those of you who don't know if there are any, I'm Sarah Flitner with Flitner Strategies, joined by my colleague Ashley Babcock. She's going to talk to you a little bit about roles, governance, schedule. I'd like each of you to go around and just give your name and affiliation, and please also type that into chat. And if there's a word or two that you want to share with the group because you're so inspired to talk about this topic and the importance of water quality in our community, that's welcome as well. So again, Sarah Flitner, Flitner Strategies, inspired by the collaboration. And I will kick it off to Joni. And then Joni, you do the same thing. Kick it off. Let's just go that way.
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Joni Gore, and I'm a hydrologist with Grand Teton National Park. And I'm going to recycle the word that I used yesterday, which is about public accessibility.
Ashley, I'm just going to go to Travis. I can't see the screen very well. If maybe you could wait to screen share so I can see everything. Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Joan. Whoever was next just went away. So Travis, please go ahead, and then I'll be able to see.
Good morning, Travis Evans, and I'm the project manager for Tri-Hydro.
Aaron, thanks, Travis.
Aaron Schulteis, I'm the manager for the Askins Pines Water and Sewer District over on the West Bank.
Welcome. Ashley?
Morning, I'm Ashley Babcock. I'm working with Sarah on this project on stakeholder outreach and communications and all sorts of other stuff. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Good morning. Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea Kegihay. I'm with WSP. We're a consulting company. I'm out of Phoenix, but we're broad. I was just asked by someone from my company to kind of listen in, kind of learn about the project, and that's pretty much just my fly on the wall.
Good. We're glad you're here. Reed?
I'm Reed Merriweather with Tri-Hydro. My expertise is mostly on the wastewater side of the master planning effort.
Amy Ramage?
Hi, everybody. Amy Ramage. I'm county engineer for Teton County, and I'm here in our conference room with Brad Ellis.
Hi, Brad Ellis, Wyoming DEQ Water and Wastewater Division.
Welcome, you two. Brian?
Hi, Brian Smith. I'm with Tri-Hydro. I am hydrogeologist and working on the vulnerability and all the groundwater stuff.
Tanya?
Tanya Anderson, Town of Jackson Ecosystem Stewardship Administrator.
Thanks. Christy?
Christy Byers, Teton County Public Engagement Specialist.
Welcome back. And Huey Thurston, did I say your name right? Can you help me with that?
Yeah, it's Hoy.
Hoy.
Close enough.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm with Tri-Hydro Corporation, working with Reed on wastewater section.
Glad to see you. Florin?
Morning, Florin Felicio, Town Public Works Director.
James?
Hi, James McJunkin with SO Systems Wastewater Technologies. We do advanced septic systems and software for septic management.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well.
David, then Megan, then Lowell.
Morning, David Lee, Water Resource Specialist for Teton Conservation District.
Hi, David.
Hi, morning. Megan Quinn with, I'm the Executive Director with Protect Our Water, Jackson Hole, one of the partners for the Water Quality Master Planning Committee. Thanks.
Welcome. Lowell, and then Gabe, if you didn't already go.
I am Lowell Reed. I work in systems and currently building a data management software tool.
That was by far the coolest introduction.
You sounded like a robot.
Darth Vader.
Yes, Darth Vader. Thank you.
You can type into chat. Lowell, feel free to type into chat. You were at the first or the second meeting, and we're glad to see you again here.
Sorry, my headphones sometimes turn me into robot voice. So yeah, Lowell Reeve, SO Systems, building a tool for data management, and I work with James. So I'll type that into chat, but thanks, guys.
Gabe, then Kelsey, and then the Conservation District.
Hi, Gabe Klamer, Fates Excavation. We are a residential excavation contractor located in Jackson.
Kelsey?
Kelsey Ruling, Watershed Protection, YMD.
Welcome. Not sure who's on the conservation. If you can, please mute yourselves if you're not talking. But Conservation District folks, please unmute yourselves because I can't see who's there. James Bruff, why don't you go while we figure out who's with us from the Conservation District?
James Bruff, Wyoming DEQ.
Welcome.
District Engineer.
Got your name right today.
Yep.
I have had my coffee. Bob Norton, and then Tom, and then Dwight, please.
I'm Bob Norton, retired professional engineer, designer of several of the wastewater treatment plants in Teton County.
Welcome. Bob Norton. You are unmuted, but we can't hear you, Bob. So use
Okay.
there you are.
You can hear me now. Oh, I'm sorry. Bob Norton, retired professional engineer and designer of several of the wastewater treatment plants in Teton County.
Thanks for being here. You clearly you can never really retire, not with this group. Welcome. Tom. Tom iPhone 7. That's all I got.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hey.
Okay. Yeah, Tom Sigerstrom, just monitoring the meeting, retired wildlife biologist.
Great
Thank
to
you.
have you. Let's see, Lindsay, then Matt, then Kristen, please.
Yeah, this is Lindsay Patterson, Wyoming DEQ. I oversee water quality standards.
Reviewing the
Glad to have you with us, Lindsay, and your team from DEQ. Matt, then Kristen, then Kelly.
Hopefully you mean me, Matt Bamback, Technical Rocket DH. Nice to be here with everyone. Excited for the discourse.
Welcome. Kristen? Gonna skip to Kelly Owens, please, and then Carrie Ratcliffe.
Hi, everyone. I'm a hydrologist at the Bridger Teton National Forest.
Welcome back. You're a glutton like some of the rest of us. Glad you're here. Kelly? Yeah,
If you meant Carrie, it's Carrie Ratcliffe. No, it's okay. I'm not sure. I'm having some trouble with my internet. I'm a board member of Protect Our Waters Jackson Hole, and I was formerly a second in command of New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection and Water Quality, Wildlife, and a whole host of other things was under my direction.
Welcome. And I did mean Carrie, so thank you for reading my mind. It's scary in there, isn't it? Welcome. Amy. Amy King. Okay.
Hi, folks. Yeah. Amy King with Legacy Works, and just excited to listen in and learn from you all today. Thanks.
Thanks for being here. Kristen, thanks. I'm coming back to you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I have audio issues from time to time when it comes to Zoom. My name is Kristen Waters. I'm the Teton County Public Information person. Christy Byers is taking the lead on this, but I will try to join when I can to these meetings just as a backup and for insight from the county.
Fabulous. And I'm going to try to keep us moving like I did, which means sometimes in awkward Zoom, I'll step on you. So do exactly what Kristen did. Raise your hand. It's just an effort to keep things moving. And some of you are not going to be paying attention the whole time. We get that. So, but we're just so delighted. You know, the turnout both yesterday and today is very high. And the whole team, the project team, as Travis puts the slides up, I will remind you, is the county, the town, Protect Our Water JH, the Conservation District, who's been, along with a few others, really spearheading this effort for a long time. And then, of course, Tri-Hydro and my team support. You are the stars of the show today. We're really thrilled to have your participation and expertise. So thanks for making time. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley, who will cover just a few housekeeping things, and we will plod right into the substance of today's meeting.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So we have 4 objectives today. First, we want to provide you all with a background on water sources and water quality in Teton County. So we're all starting from the same page. Next, we're going to move into a round of wastewater specific findings from Tri-Hydro's analysis so far. We really want to get your input on what you want to see out of this process. So as we move towards the last half of this meeting, we're going to engage you all and really hope to hear from you on what your ideal outcomes would be for this process, because the reason we're convening these meetings is we really want to hear from you. And so just a little mental preparation for, we'll seek your thoughts in a bit. And at the very end, we're going to talk about the mitigation strategy ranking criteria that we'll utilize in our plan. So you all will be helping us form those criteria, and then later we'll be selecting your ideal mitigation strategies. And so, like I said, we're bringing you together because you are the experts in the county, and we want you to help make this a really quality master plan. This isn't just folks at these 4 organizations behind closed doors. This is a public process, and we've chosen all of you to help inform this this plan. Travis, just so you know, the notes version just showed up. It looks like you might be messing with it, but anyway, we can see that.
Thanks. I will get it fixed.
No worries. So one of the most important things that we ask of you is that we want to prioritize solutions that are aligned with the group as a whole. We want to make sure we're listening to each other with curiosity and making space for opinions that might not be as popular, or we call them minority opinions. Ultimately, we just ask that you all come to these sessions with a collaboration mindset. Keep in mind that the county commissioners are going to be the ultimate decision makers. The more streamlined we can be on our end, the easier it is for them to agree with us. And I might be putting my foot in my mouth, but I think if we can make a strong case with all of us behind it, I think that is better for them ultimately, but I won't speak for, that's my understanding of it anyway. The project team, the 4 partners and the consultants are creating a plan with your input that prioritizes recommendations and next steps. And like I said, we're hoping to capture all the views.
Great job, Ashley.
Thanks. Lastly, so just so that this is clear, we're asking of all of you to help to join us in 3 meetings. There'll be one more in March and one last one in September. And in April, we're going to ask for an email response that is an important email to respond to, because that's where we're going to ask for your ideal mitigation strategies. So that's what we're asking from you for your time. And we really do appreciate you all volunteering to be here and helping inform this process. All right. And now over to Tri-Hydro. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see all of you here and the great interest in this project. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I thought I'd start off just providing a high-level overview of Teton County's water resources. And as many of you know, there's pristine surface and groundwater resources throughout the county. And then also, I did want to touch on the Eastern Snake River Plain sole source aquifer and source area. Just have a little discussion on that and provide some information. So as many of you know, the Snake River headwaters are located in Teton County, and that's this figure you see on the right. Those describe the wild portion, the river sections and stream sections that are either wild or scenic or designated recreational, which is this bluer color on the Snake River down south of Hoback. A lot of the surface waters within Teton County are designated Class 1 or Class 2AB by the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. And those typically are the highest water quality standards in the state. And then there are also some impaired streams, which actually I will touch on next. And I'm sure many of you are aware, Flat and Fish Creek have been designated as impaired. So we'll start out with Flat Creek. As you can see, the blue section up to the north of Jackson is designated non-impaired. And then the section that runs through town down to High School Road is designated as impaired for aquatic life other than fish. And then south of there, that segment is designated as impaired for aquatic life as well as recreation. And so what's that mean? In the case of the impaired segment south of town that you see in the red, that means it's designated that it can't be used for recreational use due to E. coli concentrations. And DEQ designated it as such back in 2019 when they took the geometric mean of water quality samples obtained from May 9th, 2017 to August 10th of 2017. And there was one geometric mean at the FLC station that exceeded 126 organisms per 100 milliliters. Should note that that threshold wasn't exceeded at any of the other sample sites that you see here on the map. And then I just would point out that the segment running through town is impaired mainly due to physical substrate alterations which affect aquatic life. And then Fish Creek, all of Fish Creek was designated as impaired for E. coli based on that recreational contact use standard at the same time. And there were E. coli concentrations on Fish Creek that ranged anywhere from 1 to 650 organisms per 100 milliliters. The geometric means calculated for the sites, there were 4 geometric means calculated, and 3 of the 4 exceeded 126 organisms per 100 milliliters. So therefore, they determined that recreational use was not supported. This is also important because Teton County has very shallow groundwater throughout the Jackson Hole Valley. It's a very critical factor when we looked at our vulnerability and sensitivity analysis. In addition, there are several studies that demonstrate that surface water and groundwater is highly connected and very much interconnected throughout the alluvial valley. And Brian, I mean, we're going to touch on this a little more, but just due to the fact that groundwater is relatively shallow, there is higher potential for contamination throughout the valley. And finally, I know there's a lot of talk around the sole source aquifer and source area, so I just wanted to lay out what's that mean. The map you're seeing here, the dark green area is the eastern Snake River Plain sole source aquifer. It is the water supply. It is the primary water supply for that region. The dotted area here that you see is the source area. So this is the areas where surface water and groundwater contributes to the recharge area for the sole source aquifer. As you can see, the source area is located in Teton County. And I've been asked the question throughout the process of, well, what does sole source aquifer designation mean? And really, the short answer is the EPA can designate a sole source aquifer and identify a source area. And what that does is it gives the EPA the authority to review projects that receive federal funding to ensure they're not going to further degrade water quality. That is the only regulatory mechanism tied to sole source aquifer designation. In fact, federal projects, for federal agencies that are fully federal funded, they don't have the authority to review those projects. So sole source aquifer designation just provides the EPA authority to review projects. We've reviewed, over 40 planning efforts and studies, and there's going to be a report coming out shortly that summarizes the review of all those documents. But I wanted to share just some general conclusions that we've observed, or observations that we've had reviewing all of those documents. One, I think, is the alluvial aquifer is complex and not fully understood. Many of the studies have suggested that a much more detailed analysis is required to fully understand the alluvial aquifer in the Jackson Hole Valley. It is very complex, and the level of study that would be required would be rather large and would require a lot of effort. As I mentioned before, there's several studies that demonstrated that surface and groundwater are in communication and interconnected, which is important because the Snake River, as it rises, groundwater levels typically rise. We also looked at a lot of water quality data. We found that there is a lot of data, but it is spatially and temporally variable. So it's in numerous locations across the county. Some of it is for a very small period of time. Some of it is for longer periods of time. And I just would note that some of the best data sources we have came from the Conservation District, and their data collection efforts have really been gone up since the 2000s. Obviously, their data collection efforts are very focused on certain locations or specific projects, but there is a pretty good source of data from them. And I think the other observation is that nutrient and microbial sources are not fully understood. There's been a lot of studies on that I don't think have came to any strong conclusions yet, and maybe have led to more questions, which is great. That's not uncommon. But it's something that we might want to consider as we look at impacts from wastewater moving forward. And I think what's really the big data gap we're seeing is just water quality from surface water runoff and how that would impact both stream and groundwater quality. With that, I just thought we could open it up for some questions for 5 or 10 minutes, or we could also just keep moving forward and dive into more of the wastewater discussion. And I guess you can either type in your questions in the chat, or we could just raise your hand through Zoom and we'll make sure we address your questions.
Yeah, I will watch chat. So all of you, please feel free to use it. I'm on a single screen today, and that's not ideal for this fabulous attendance. Ashley, you can help me. So use the hand, your physical hand, use the hand prompt or raised hand feature, or use chat and we'll find you. Any questions of Travis so far?
And I would point out that if there are any questions that we can't get to, we're certainly going to be recording those and responding to them later on if we can't get to them today. Well, should we move on to the wastewater focus discussion?
Please.
All right, I would like to turn it over to Reed Merriweather, who's going to provide an overview of wastewater management. And Reed, it's all yours.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. So, wastewater is one of the key elements that we're looking at, obviously, because of what it is. It's wastewater. So that sounds horrible, and all the pollution in the county must be coming from the wastewater. And how can we deal with this? And so, we wanted to give this a lot of attention because, it is obviously a potential source of some of the contamination that we're seeing. So we want to really take a hard look at the different aspects of wastewater treatment in the county. And so, first of all, I wanted to give a little explanation of, obviously everyone knows what wastewater is. We had the drinking water, so we drink it, and then when it goes somewhere else, we call it wastewater. And so we get rid of it in different ways. There are basically 3 different ways that wastewater is treated and released back into the environment in Teton County. And I'm going to go over each one of those. And the 3 are, we call it underground injection systems. We have what I call wastewater treatment plants. And then we have the small wastewater systems, which affectionately everyone calls septic systems, but they're actually small mini wastewater treatment plants. So with that, Travis, we'll go to the next slide. So here's a map of the county just to orient where we are. It is kind of pointing weird. So to the right is north. So you're looking up is west and east is to the bottom. So just kind of orient, you can see Hoback, which Hoback Junction, which is over to the left side, kind of center of the screen. You have the Wilson area kind of in the middle. Town of Jackson is really in the middle of this map. Teton Village, and then obviously we go to the north toward Yellowstone and the parklands. So just kind of orient, what we're seeing here in this map. So we've added two basic things to this map. This map shows what we call the underground injection systems. Those are blue. We have some of them highlighted in red because those particular facilities have had some kind of violation reported in the last few years. And I would say that we've had about 25 of these underground injection systems. Those are basically a septic system and some kind of well that takes the treated effluent and puts it back into the ground. We've had 5 of those with some kind of exceedance in the past few years. And then 4 of those 5, though, are actually looking to either improve their system or actually tie into a municipal system to remedy that problem. So they are looking to try to remedy the situation. And generally those violations have had to do with, generally an exceedance that is some kind of ammonia or nitrate. And that is one of the key elements when we look at our stream vulnerabilities. What we have is nutrients, and those nutrients cause algae blooms. Those algae blooms suck the oxygen out of the water. They can cause solids to build up in those streams that can choke out both plant and fish populations. So nutrients as a whole are a serious problem that is one of the main water quality issues that can be affecting our streams. And so that's what we're trying to look at is, what are some of the possible causes. But also you'll see the green triangles. Those are actually larger, what we call wastewater treatment plants. And we'll go into that a little bit more. But you have the town of Jackson, Teton Village, Aspen Pines. You have the Moose Inn. You've got also Grand Tohigi wastewater treatment plant. So we'll talk a little bit more about those in just a minute. Any questions about this map? You kind of see in the whole county the kind of distribution of these are all larger contributors of one way or another into the groundwater system, into the aquifer. That this treated effluent goes back. But any questions about this? Okay, I will go on. So as I said, underground injection control system, they go by the acronym UIC facilities. Basically, they're like a septic system on steroids. So you still have a septic system. And again, what is a septic system? Well, it takes the waste that comes from the facility, and most of these UICs are not associated with a home. That generally differentiates. They're some kind of business, some kind of facility that needs a larger capacity than what a home would discharge, but they're still using a septic system, which is generally without oxygen. Some are hybrid, that they have some element of aeration following an anaerobic section. And so what we do is we're treating the wastewater. We separate out the liquid, allow the solids to settle. The solids are generally broken down with what we call anaerobic. That's without oxygen. That slowly breaks down that mass of waste that stays in the tank and is trapped there. The liquid part is still full of ammonia, so that part gets further treatment in the anaerobic process, and then some of these even have an aerobic process after them before they're discharged into the injection well. Now, they are going to have higher levels, but they are monitored by the state. They tend to also have monitoring wells associated with the injection well. So the injection well is the point where the treated effluent goes back into the ground. but then you also will have monitoring wells that are somewhere around the perimeter of the property generally, and they're going to see going out so far from the well, how is the ground naturally attenuating? And that's an important thing. All septic type systems, whether they be an injection well, or we'll show a picture later of a regular septic system, they really use a concept of what we call natural attenuation. That is using the microbes that are naturally occurring in the soil, that are naturally even in the aquifer, even into the rocks themselves, that there's bacteria that grow there, that bacteria itself is not harmful. That bacteria itself breaks down any kind of waste that come through there. That is the natural water cycle, that rainfall has a certain amount of waste that start at the surface and is naturally filtered out and trickled as it goes through the ground. So all of these systems use that natural system.
Reed, can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
I just thought I'd point out that it is confusing with UIC facilities that the permits are a Class 5 injection well, but majority of these facilities in Teton County, they're not actually wells that are injecting the effluent into the subsurface. They're actually large leach fields, similar to what you would see on a conventional septic system.
Yeah.
So this is a little misleading, potentially, this figure.
Yeah.
In some ways, so.
And it really has to do with the volume, because their volume exceeds what we normally see of somewhere around 1,000 gallons per day that might come from a large home. They would exceed that and could be, several thousand gallons going into the system. All right, can we go to the next one?
Oops, too late. Hey, Reed, this is Amy. Can we?
Yes.
The second,
Yeah.
Brad
Please.
wants to say something.
Yeah, this is Brad Ellis from DEQ, and that graphic is extremely misleading. I don't think we'd ever permit anything like that. So just like Travis brought up, we're looking at just really large leach fields, not direct injection as shown in that graphic.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The next thing we have is we actually have our wastewater treatment plants in and around the county. So this is actually part of the town of Jackson's very large lagoon system. It's got maybe a couple of 100 acres that's all involved with the various lagoons. You also see the ponds that are to the bottom. Those are part of the wetlands. That's not actually part of the actual treatment system. Those 3 ponds are wetlands that are actually cooperative effort with Fish and Wildlife and Ducks Unlimited, but the wastewater is channeled through there. The treated effluent, I would say, is channeled through there, and they provide additional nutrients and a secondary benefit because it provides additional habitat for wildlife. But as you can see, there are algae blooms and other things that are naturally occurring in there from those nutrients. But at the same time, the purpose of the wetlands is to help trap that algae and use that as a benefit to algae. And a lot of that is actually what we call duckweed, which is a small plant that actually is taking up the nutrients. So when we look at these facilities, Teton Village, which was located to the west of the northwest of Wilson, that facility is rated at just under 1 million gallons per day. Aspen Pines, which is near Wilson, that those are both mechanical wastewater treatment systems. They provide aeration to the wastewater, clarification, and filtration to that water before it is injected into wells. So those are treated to near drinking water standards, and they do go into a series of wells. And so they are UIC facilities, Aspen Pines being around 500,000 gallons per day. The town of Jackson, that is 5 million gallons per day. That's not how much they're actually discharging right now. They're closer to half that. In fact, all of these facilities are generally discharging below these permitted limits that they have. And then Grand Tahiti at 0.3 MGD, it is kind of on the large side of still that multiple septic tank system and then leachate, large leachate field following that facility. But it is a very large facility coming off that resort. Any questions about these facilities? And again, of these, only the town of Jackson actually has a surface water discharge that goes into the Snake River eventually. Any questions on this? I can't see hands, so speak up. Okay,
Yeah,
we'll
let's
come
just
back.
do a pause, Reed, just making sure because we can't see the hands very well.
Yeah, that's what I say. If somebody speaks up, just go for it. Ask a question. And we can always come back.
Yeah, I think, yeah, James brought up a good point, that Teton Village and the Aspens are, they're treating their effluent to higher quality than the groundwater protection standards. So they have, the nitrate limit's 10 milligrams per liter and ammonia is 0.5 milligrams per liter. And they're, from what we're seeing, their level of treatment is to a much higher level than those standards, like probably to half.
Yeah, and to that end, the town of Jackson, their lagoon system generally functions below what the state requirements are, and they are looking to possibly make upgrades to that facility to even improve the water even more, because the citizens within the town of Jackson are also looking to see can we do better. So they are looking at those opportunities and are considering those. And Florin, you have a meeting coming up to discuss that with your board, your town council?
That's correct. Tentatively, it's on the February 21st Town Council workshop agenda. We may need to push it out if council feels like they need more time with the final report that the other tri-hydro team put together for that project. But tentatively, it's February 21st council workshop. We'll be presenting some recommendations on it.
And that also is available as a Zoom meeting as well. So if there's people that are outside in the county or stakeholders, even in this call, if you have an interest, you can look on their website and definitely still attend that remotely. So again, the final system is a small system, but as they pointed out, this is actually representative, really better representative of the first slide as well. It's just a matter of scale that you can have multiple leach fields for the UIC system. And so here's a typical septic system. Like I said, whether it's a small system for a house, it may be somewhere anywhere from a few hundred gallons a day to somewhere around 1,000 gallons a day. Generally, that's based on the number of bedrooms. That's how the permits are generally set up. So the more bedrooms they have, the larger that the septic tanks are required to be, and the more leachate field is required, as far as linear feet. So what happens in these things again is the wastewater comes into the tank, the solids separate into the tank. You may have multiple tanks, which is pretty typical. And you also have oils and greases. They become like a waxy solid. They tend to float to the top. So your piping coming into these has natural baffles in there so that the water that's kind of in the middle is what flows on through. That water goes into the leach lines. And that's still an extremely important part of the system. That's actually where most of the treatment takes place, is in that soil zone that it actually biodegrades. So what we find is in your area, we have different types of soil. And so the county has specified that depending on where you are, you can have a septic system with a leach field. Some places you may see what's called a mound system, where they actually build up a hill to provide extra soil so the micronutrients, the bacteria that live in the soil, can further break down the bacteria will break down the nutrients that are still coming through these lines and leaching out of the soil. So the key part of this is that the solids are staying in the tank, the grease is staying in the tank. The liquid part is really not treated in the tank. That's treated in the leach lines. And that's a really critical step. And what we found is that there are areas where you don't have enough topsoil between where you're putting the leach lines and the groundwater aquifer. So that those nitrates, they tend to leach down into the aquifer. And is that a potential source of nitrates in the system? Well, what we're seeing is when you get out some distance from those houses, I mean, within like, 50 yards of the property, those numbers do degrade significantly. So most of these septic systems are doing a fine job that we've seen monitored, and the results that we're seeing. So, they may not be the bad actors that they've been labeled, but certainly one of the key parts of any septic system, just like a large treatment plant, is maintenance. And that's probably where the biggest breakdown might be in the county, is that, it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't have to do anything until I see water bubbling up in the ground. And then I know my septic system has completely failed. And lucky me, I can go out and spend $30,000 or $40,000 and replace it. One of the things we may look at is, would periodic pumping of these septic systems benefit the county as a whole? I can tell you from my experience across the country, it will benefit the homeowner, whether it's a source of problems or not. Eventually, solids fill up in the tanks, grease fills up. Some of these houses are used for vacation homes and rentals. So they see, they may have 4 bedrooms, but they may see, 10, 15 people come in there for a ski weekend, which can greatly overload what the system was actually designed for. So these are things that we may want to consider in the big picture of how we maintain these kind of systems better. And I think with that, that's all of my part. So again, if there's questions, I'm certainly available to answer that.
Thanks, Reed. This is Brian Smith, and wanted to just touch on what we've done to look at the groundwater. Many familiar faces. This will be old hat, and I'll try to be brief, but we have done what's called a sensitivity analysis within for the groundwater within Teton County. And the first step was to look at the sensitivity regardless of the contaminant. And we did what's called a drastic analysis. We looked at, as Travis mentioned earlier, groundwater in general, especially within the valley proper, is very shallow. And so with this drastic model, we looked at the depth of groundwater. We looked at recharge sources, the aquifer media, the soil media, which Reed has talked about before. Very, very important with regard to wastewater and systems' ability to attenuate what comes within the system. And some of the others are topography, and the Vados zone has a lot to do with the soil. The Vados zone's the area between the ground surface and your first groundwater. And so particularly with shallow wastewater systems, that's very important to analyze. But what you'll see here is the darker colors represent the higher sensitivities with regard to the aquifer and groundwater. The yellows and the greens are a lower sensitivity. And so, we looked at this, and from a planning perspective, it may not be very useful, right? Because there's such large areas with what appears to be the same vulnerability or same sensitivity. So we wanted to refine this process. And so what we did was, we know that there's a large issue that has to do with wastewater in the county. And so we started to look at what could we do to better characterize the human impact. Could you move to the next? There we go. And so we developed a specific vulnerability model package, very similar to what we did with the drastic model. And what we incorporated into this is the septic system density, the type of septic systems, were these mounded septic systems, were these and particularly proximity of these septic systems to surface water bodies, UIC facilities to surface water bodies. And those are really important because this groundwater system being shallow, it interacts constantly with the surface water, and that can be large surface water bodies like the Snake River and the larger lakes, but also the natural ponds and lakes that are smaller, man-made ponds, man-made water bodies. They all interact directly with the groundwater. And so that's what we try to achieve here, is to focus in on what would be the vulnerability to, if we factored in all these other human impact factors. And so what we're looking at here is a map of the Hoback Junction area. And we know there's septic related impacts down there. And the sensitivity, this is something to point out here, is that the aquifer sensitivity in that area, which is, the green stippled areas you see, was relatively low. And so how is that, right? And so what we did here was we took those septic densities, and you can see the warmer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure we turn that back on. All right, thank you.
And so, but you can also see on the right-hand side, we've got different materials, over by the industrial area and the transfer station by the bird, where we again have a high vulnerability rating with respect to the shallow wastewater. And I'd also like to point out on here is, you see green dots and orange dots on there. Those are represent water quality with respect to nitrates. And so the green represents data that's from 0 to 2 milligrams per liter. And in general, that's considered the representative background for this area. And the oranges and in some cases the reds represent elevated nitrate constituents. And so we need to be aware of that, obviously. And again, it's a good tool to look at if there are some priority areas that, either need to be further assessed or maybe need a change in, permitting structure, or what have we. And so this was a tool to better focus on the human impact side, specific to the wastewater issues.
Hey, Brian, could I pause you for just a moment and
Yep.
ask James Bruff to weigh in for the whole group? James, if you want, I noticed a couple of chats, one just a few minutes ago and one about 10 minutes ago. Obviously, people can read them, but I'd welcome your if you're off mute.
Sure, just my observation that I guess with my first comment is historically a lot of leach fields have been buried deeply, let's say 5 feet and deeper. There's still some that exist there. So most of the bacteria reside within the vegetative zone, let's say first three feet or so. So I guess the key point is the deep leach fields or drain fields are more likely to pollute, if you will. If we install them not so deep within the root zone, and there's also things that can be done, like there are some systems that have a Renko vent, some vents systems that improve the treatment. Also pressure dosing rather than gravity fed, or some means to improve treatment or facilitate treatment within the subsurface is a comment or two. I was going to type a comment regarding Hoback Junction too, but it's been my observations that
some of the subdivisions that were platted, approved back in the 50s and 70s, as mentioned previously, you have small acre lots, let's say quarter acre lots. There you can see the trend where the nitrate levels have risen from 2 to 10 plus over the years. You do have the market over there. There was that they were the first one to get hit with elevated nitrates in their water. So I think that was back in 2004, where they had to install ion exchange for treatment. That's kind of where it started. So again, their leach field is deep. You have a lot of tourism coming, so their leach field actually is deep and it's below the parking lot. So you probably don't have too much natural treatment occurring there, let's say at the Holback store. When you go deep below the pavement, and you get a lot of tourists there. So you have probably a big source, or that'd be a big fish in the bowl, if you will. But there's a combination of things. So those are my comments for now.
Thanks a lot, James.
Yeah, certainly those are all good considerations. And, you know, we can't just whitewash an arm wave, obviously, on and focus on just certain criteria moving forward.
Sure. Just one more thought, like the Holback Junction area, sure, you have the fractured shale, and just the production, those wells are not that productive. I know at the market, sometimes if you drill in other places in the valley, you can easily get several hundred GPM from a well, but there, the Holback Junction, you have the fractured shale, you may get 5 or 10 GPM, or sometimes during a drought area that I think the market has to haul the water at this time.
Yeah, you certainly don't get the flux of groundwater that you do in areas out in the middle of the alluvial aquifer.
Yeah.
Chris has a question or a comment as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Two things. One, yesterday we were talking about this issue of the drastic model and how it's not really lining up with what we're seeing on the ground in the Holback, and then using this more specific vulnerability model that we helped develop. But I wonder, Brian, if you could speak to what variables in that drastic model you think just aren't working in this area, or are working against what we're seeing on the ground. And then my second question was, since our last meeting, the Conservation District has published their septic effluent study, and I wondered if you, Brian, or maybe David Lee could summarize some of that.
I'd probably defer to David to summarize the work that he was closely related with, but I'll touch on the first question. I think most of it has to do, and we've talked about this multiple times, is simply the flux of the groundwater, and James is well aware of that in his comments, is that I think there's just not the flux and dilution of water in relationship to, and the position within the Holback of, because you don't have a flux through the natural system, and it's a wicked combination of those small plots and low permeability material. You've got the septics directly overlying the limited, from a volume standpoint, of the groundwater sources for all the users down in that area. And so, that's the part of that. I think that's the part of the drastic model that it is not reliable in predicting the sensitivity. I think it's very specific. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry to put David on the spot, but I know we talked about this at our last stakeholder gathering, and seems like that information is relative and new to this discussion that might be helpful for sharing.
Are you asking David to comment? I don't
Well,
see.
maybe he stepped away, so we
Yeah,
can continue on.
yeah, absolutely. And feel free to text or chat, Chris, for when he gets back.
Sarah?
Yes.
Carlin's on though.
Carlin Drawer, Teton Conservation District. Yeah, it looks like we kind of had inverse availability here. I could speak to the septic system effluent monitoring study briefly if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the Conservation District, Teton County, and with funding from Protect Our Water GH, monitored 4 septic systems, kind of in shallow groundwater circumstances, really mainly for ease of well development. Those deeper groundwater areas present some challenges with regard to well development for monitoring. And so we instrumented 4 systems, and 3 really had strong data. 1, the groundwater actually just dropped way out of, so it's more like three systems. And I would say the primary findings were that the removal of nitrogen during the winter months, during cold periods, really dropped off. But the ability to find nitrogen of any sort downstream of septic systems at an appreciable distance. So we monitored at 10 feet and we monitored at 50 feet downstream in an array from those septic systems. At 10 feet, there was some slight increases. At 50 feet, very limited increase. And we really attribute that to dilution. And so I think it helps tell the story to some extent that kind of as you might imagine here, between the soils, between the temperature, there are periods that we have pretty limited treatment. But in the areas where we were monitoring, which were shallow groundwater areas, we have a very strong dilution effect. So we also were monitoring temperature of the effluent as it was moving through that system, and that was also really telling. In the coldest periods, there were some sites that had temperatures in the 2 degrees C range, so just above freezing, and that you would expect very low microbial activity in soils and water at those temperatures. And so that was another thing that was, we have data on now, which we really value. So that we produced some recommendations, and in general, that study helped us just parameterize what are a traditional, or in this case, actually mounted septic systems, but a typical septic system here that's functioning. What can we expect in terms of the effluent quality leaving it? And in the summer periods, they work quite well. In the winter periods, efficacy does drop off, but in those locations, dilution was extremely powerful. I don't know if that's a good synopsis, David, probably. But that's what I've got.
Thanks, Carlin.
I have if you don't mind, I have a quick comment. Over a year ago, I was able to attend a workshop. It was Colorado on-site septic, but there was a presenter there, associate professor. I have to go look it up. I think he was from Kansas, and I'll have to refresh my memory on his name. But he had a study on septic systems and just the let's say your nutrients, and then also your pathogens, your E. coli, but where your effluent, septic effluent, tends to percolate down, but kind of right on top of the water table, your capillary fringe, if you will. So if you're in the summertime, if you're within the root zone, you can anticipate, let's say, some further treatment within the, I guess, when the vegetation is active and the bacteria and so forth. So that some of those studies were interesting. I'll try to find that, some of that information. I'd also, Carlin, be interested in seeing a copy of that study from Teton County as well.
Great. We will make a note. Carlin, you got that? Anybody else with questions or comments? Okay, well, thanks for that. Reed, back to you.
Or I think that kind of wraps things up, actually, Sarah, for this section.
Right.
I just would, I guess, one of our initial observations in reviewing the 2022 septic effluent monitoring study, then also looking at the study prepared by Nelson Engineering in the early 90s, where they also looked at groundwater quality throughout the West Bank. When we compared sites from the 1992 study that were as close to as we could get to the 2022 study, is the groundwater quality actually was a little better in the 20 currently than it was in 92. If you just looked at things like nitrates, concentrations now were a little lower, but again, for purposes of evaluation at this early stage, I'd just say they're very comparable and very similar. There were no notable increases at all. But that was just an interesting observation. So there's always lots, it seems like we have a lot more questions the further we delve into this topic.
Yeah. Right. They will convene to some answers, but it is complicated. And I guess that's a decent segue, Travis, into this next discussion, which is a request of all of you to come back up to sort of 60,000 feet. We toggled back and forth about starting with this visioning, and those of you remember that we were going to do this in October when we were in face-to-face, and a couple of things happened, including a lower turnout than we wanted. But we decided, rather than starting with the visioning, to give you some of the context and the data analysis so that you had that for context and in the back of your mind. And now we're going to challenge your brains to bring you back to this sort of aspirational side of your brain, and to just give us some feedback in terms of these higher level questions. Again, you can use chat, you can use your voices, you can all come off mute and we will figure it out, having a discussion without talking over each other. It's not a problem. The energy for these kinds of conversations is sometimes really helpful. So I encourage you to not worry too much and just use your voices. I'm going to guide you through some pretty straightforward questions, and I'll just state the obvious. You'll note that they are framed in sort of ideal vision language, and there's a reason that we want your brains to come back to kind of grounding into why you're excited about this conversation and what's really at stake in terms of the highest level of success. Like if we really, really achieved the most ideal outcomes, what would that look like? So it might seem obvious, but we want your words and to understand kind of your drive. And I also want to say, I learned this yesterday, obviously, a lot of you could say, because it's my job, I work for the government and this is what we do, or the DEQ or a nonprofit. We know that, So that's not what I'm after. I'm after specificity from each of you as leaders with your particular context. And that includes your own values. So I just want to start with, give us an idea of the topics, specific topics with regard to wastewater that you are most looking forward to discussing, weighing in on, making sure that your views are shared. Ashley, if you would watch chat, that would help. And I'm going to watch people. And again, remember before pandemic, we talked all the time, people.
James Bruff is starting us off with a comment in the chat. Several of the subdivision in the Hoback Junction area were approved back in the 1950s to 1970s. They consisted of small lot sizes, For example, quarter acres with on-site septic system. Furthermore, the market septic system is buried deep below the parking lot. The market system is heavily hit by tourists and likely results in higher strength wastewater. The wells in the Hoback area are developed in fractured shale and have limited recharge areas with low water production.
Okay, so
Thank you for that comment.
Yeah, and thanks, Ashley. So, just you want to weigh in on, and you don't need to repeat, but just looking at specific areas and remedies that are appropriate for particular conditions. Small lot sizes, where the septics are buried, how deep they are. Am I capturing that?
Yeah, it's deep in some areas like, yeah, if you have a rest stop where the bathrooms are heavily used, you can anticipate a higher wastewater strength there.
Thanks. I'm going to go very slowly, leading us through these questions and pause a lot. Get comfortable with that, but it helps people. It just helps make sure we don't cut anyone off and we can go back. So I don't see anything more in chat for now. Why all of you, some of you have weighed in before, but this topic, you know, there are several different stakeholder groups. And again, some of you have a particular interest in this topic commercially or otherwise, that's fine. But there probably was something. Was it knowledge? Was it just curiosity around this particular set of issues in Teton County? Give us a sense of why this topic is meaningful to you. And thanks, Aaron, got it, for the sewer collection system for Hoback.
I'll weigh in, Sarah.
Please do, Carlin.
You know, I guess I feel like I've been involved now with property owners, you know, pregnant children, or pregnant with children, and feeling like, you know, there are risks to human health that are present in our community that, you know, the public water systems have some responsibility over, but also don't always nail that, but especially private wells. And so I feel like we have a responsibility to people to help them navigate some of these challenges. It feels like it takes a team in a lot of cases. A lot of times that property isn't the one that can actually solve the issue. They just have the issue. And so, yeah, providing resources to help address human and environmental health concerns both.
Yeah, the stakes are far from low. And I'm not gonna pressure you, Carlin, so stay silent if you want to, but you said something, you know, the power of the collaboration you kind of referenced, like having other leaders and experts and community members and policymakers in the discussion with you. You didn't use an adjective, so you can if you want to. But this idea that a group of thinkers might be able to solidify sustainable solutions because of that diversity of expertise or something.
Yeah, and I think I'll start with, you know, in small rural communities, you don't need a lot of coordination. You don't need a lot of action. I think it's a growing pain that you deal with when you grow as a community, where you need a more systematic and thoughtful approach to drinking water protection. And we're up against that now. Oftentimes it's individuals that bear the brunt of the impact, but they just don't have the capacity to actually make any meaningful changes from a, you know, groundwater health or protection standpoint. It's a much broader community of people, whether that's regulatory or even private landowners, et cetera. So yeah, it just takes a lot of effort, it turns out, to turn the tide on these things.
Yeah. we're using appreciative inquiry model, and what Carlin just did for all of us is skillful, though he probably doesn't even know it. The tendency with these big thorny problems is either we find someone to blame because we get overwhelmed and our brains are tired by that, or we walk away because it's fatiguing and we don't even know that we're doing it, right? It's often a subconscious thing. And I just want to thank you, Carlin, for accidentally or on purpose calling that out, because in a community of problem solving, there's a lot more resilience to lean into. And that is part of what Ashley and I are going to keep talking about, and Chris too, why the county is leading in this way and taking this so seriously, Carlin as well. We can go a lot farther together. And if we were in the room at the same time, we would probably be feeling those warm, fuzzy, like mirror neuron things firing off, because at the, some level, we know this, that we are reliant on each other to solve this problem, and the stakes are high, as Carlin reminded us. So ideal outcomes. I mean, Carlin started us off, but clean drinking water for families, including families who are in the making. What else in terms of ideal outcomes? Not only how you might specifically measure water quality, but just process wise, how you want to feel, how you want the other people who are engaged in this conversation to feel, how you want the information to flow. Anything is on the table in terms of giving us direction on what's ideal. What's an ideal outcome as far as you're concerned?
I'd like to follow up on what Carlin was saying, if I may. I think the ideal outcome for me is exactly what this project was intended to do. Let's look at all of the stakeholders, all of the resources. We all care about this because of the implications for families and communities. And to me, I think the ideal outcome is the way this is being approached. It's a holistic view of what do we have and what do we need, and what are the best fit solutions based on our fiscal and human resources to get it done. So I just very much appreciate that we're not kind of looking at everything in different boxes, but that this project team is genuinely trying to find, the solutions, looking at the whole big picture of what's needed.
Thanks, Florin. It's great.
Hi, this is Carrie Ratcliffe, agreeing with most of what everybody said. And just from my perspective, in coming into the Valley about 8-9 years ago, the water quality hasn't been under an umbrella of protective and restorative care. And that doesn't mean that lots of people haven't been working at specific issues and on specific silos of care, but we haven't had an overlay of governance that really looks at the cumulative impacts of multiple sources of pollutants and harm to our waters. And that has created a not very forward-looking process. It's created a disparate process. It's created a lot of difficulty in managing the resources and in finding solutions that make sense in an equitable manner. And I think that's what everybody has mentioned about fairness to communities and stakeholders. And we really are not an equitable community. And I think that that's a value we should really bring into this process. But more so in terms of a solution, I think trying to find some kind of governance overlay, whatever that might be, that can assure all the residents of the county that any process that impacts water has a look at the cumulative nature of it, that its goal is for protection and restoration, which we haven't used that word very much, but that should be, in my opinion, part of our value system for this. And that will work to coordinate, as you have said, a sustainable and practicable solution to our now disparate and in some cases really ineffective protection.
Mm-hmm. Really helpful comments, Carrie. Thank you for the specificity and going deeper, you know, including, and that's one of the reasons I really love how Ashley started, right? To make sure that we're considering minority opinions or opinions that aren't in the room or voices that aren't covered all the time. And that's not only important because it's moral, but it's important because guess what? Funding streams that are available are demanding it now. And so it's the right thing, and it's also a practical thing. So thank you for bringing that up in a few different ways. I hope that's fair to say. I was summarizing you, Carrie Kelly. First I renamed you and now I'm summarizing you. So correct.
It's all good. The name isn't important.
Well, it is. Anyone else? Thank you for the great, it's great feedback so far. Anyone else on ideal outcomes? Again, feel free to revisit a previous question, but I'm going to keep going. This is always the Hail Mary and the hope that, you know, we'll discover that there are new technologies. And of course, this is true, especially in this stakeholder group, this is a possibility. So we just want to make sure we're alert to those of you who may know about new technologies or approaches that are applied elsewhere that maybe would be an option for our locale. New ideas too, maybe not just new technologies. We did talk about this a little bit in October, I think it was. So I'm watching chat, and I'll just, the last concluding kind of discussion guiding question is catch-all. What do you want us to keep in mind? You know, from how you want to meet to things that are really important to you in terms of process. Bob, is that a hand up?
Yes.
I liked the applause first, Bob. I was
Okay.
oh, thanks.
Yeah, I got to hit the right buttons. So I think there are some technologies that could help. I agree with James' comment about having the leach fields too deep are not effective. But we also found in that study on the leach fields that the ones that are too shallow are subject to temperature fluctuations. So I think there's a happy medium where the regulations might be changed to have a minimum depth as well as a maximum depth. I also think that it's probable that an advanced treatment system using aerobic processes in areas where, such as a deep leach field underneath a parking area would be the appropriate technology. Third, in the presentation, they left out a wastewater treatment plant at Moose. Actually, there's also one at Alpine, which I know is outside of Teton County, but still discharges into the Snake River. Both of those two plants are membrane biological systems. The advantage to them is that they don't have a clarifier that is subject to lowering the temperature. And I'll go back to the statement that temperature is very, very important for the biological treatment process. So to answer your question, I think there are technologies out there that are better than the conventional leach field or the conventional wastewater treatment plant.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. Florin, you've got the floor, and Kelsey and James have some chats, which we will capture in the notes, but I just want to call your attention to them. Go ahead, Florin.
Thank you. I want to go back to the design question, the new ideas, new technologies. I'm very interested in exploring the opportunities for recycled water from treatment systems and how we can identify ways to effectively reuse the effluent rather than sending it to surface waters or injection wells or wherever, it's going. But I think it, obviously larger capital expenses, but one of my dreams, I would say, is to, in some new neighborhood development somewhere down the road, have a parallel water system that pulls in recycled water to use for things like irrigation, so that it offsets the need for the potable water, treated water supply. I think even though the capital cost is there for that type of system, in the long term, it certainly preserves our water resources and also could likely see, long-term cost savings.
Great. James McJunkin. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Sarah. Just wanted to reference back to an allusion you made to the funding available and ways to increase the likelihood of securing some of that federal and state funding for Teton County. There's a concept and a structure that's being pushed by the EPA, primarily on the East Coast right now. It's a Responsible Management Entity, or RME, which is essentially a sewer authority for septic systems, specifically for the decentralized wastewater treatment systems that we've all been talking about quite a bit. And to me, that really, what that means is continuing on this approach we're taking, this collaborative approach we're taking over time, rather than just having this collaborative approach being focused on water quality management plan, really making it operational and continuing over time to collect and use all the resources we have available. Massachusetts has recently implemented RMEs around the Cape Cod area and have secured several $1 million of funding to establish those from the EPA. And I think there's a great opportunity there if we can continue this approach we're already taking to secure some outside funding for some of these initiatives.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it. I don't see any other hands. We are kind of moving towards the conclusion of our discussion. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Another thing, though, I want to keep there we go, Tanya. Good. I'm glad to see you pop up. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah. I just, to the maybe the deliver, maybe it's dream. I don't know. It's somewhere in there. I think I would like us to keep in mind, or perhaps have an ideal outcome be a wide variety of strategies that include policy, land development regulations, changes in practices, and some of those things, as well as some of the new technology. And, those, sometimes you can go straight to something that's a big technology, and, keeping this whole array of solutions in mind and coming out with options in all of those categories that can help us improve water quality.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thanks. I think it's funny how we all sort of apologize for the dream big parts, especially when it's sort of the relationship piece, the humans working together. And we're just going to keep saying, no, that's the right track. That's the exciting part. That's exactly what we want from you, and exactly where the juice is, especially as we combine it with new technologies and new infrastructure, new funding that will allow those dreams to get on the ground. But it is what's so unique about these collaborative processes, and it's really hard to do on Zoom, and you guys are making it easy. I really appreciate that, and I know the county and Travis appreciate it as well. James?
Sure. I've had some discussions over in the past with some of the entities where we know we have problems with groundwater pollution and kind of the challenge. So we might discuss some of these technologies that would improve, let's say, the treatment of the septic system, but they all come with a price tag, which seems to be much higher than what they're willing to pay out as a private citizen, if you will, or as a business owner. And so I've seen that in two different areas in Teton County. I guess it has to hurt a lot for them to want to finance the cost of fixing their septic problems and, let's say, installing advanced treatment that's going to improve the effluent quality. So I see that as a challenge. What's going to persuade them to want to install or make that change?
Well, one answer is the power of this group and the varied constituents, and then you have other stakeholder groups who are going to face the challenge from their own purview. But it's a good point you make, and it's human nature. We could be better, but we don't typically respond quickly until it's really painful. So that's something for us all to keep in mind at the front end of this process. Some of the best ideas are going to be the most expensive, and there will be resistance to that. And so all of you get to direct the recommendations and the prioritization, which is, I think, what's coming up next, Travis, if I'm not mistaken. As Travis transitions to the next slide, so I can figure out where the heck we are in the agenda on my one screen. I also want to say that I keep referring to the county and its leadership, and I mean town and county. The county was the agency who got, who was charged with leading this process. And I think Chris and Heather and all the other county folks would agree that Tanya and Florin and her team have been indispensable and will continue to be. So it's a big partnership.
Thanks, Sarah. And I really thank all of you for your feedback. I think there's a lot of the items that were discussed here previously kind of lead us into how we're going to evaluate potential mitigation measures moving forward. And, we're looking for feedback. I've just thrown up this list of potential criteria to evaluate mitigation measures, and I'm certainly looking for all of your feedback on these. And I think we've hit on them, so a few of them already, just in the earlier discussion. But some examples would be, I think that came up already, was community acceptance. Also, I think came up already was social benefits. Are we addressing society as a whole? Are we looking at underserved or other groups that maybe don't have as vocal of a opinion on some of these issues, and making sure everyone can afford it, whatever that solution might be. We also talked about, we're looking at evaluating this from sustainability. Is there green infrastructure associated with a potential solution? Looking at the cost of a potential mitigation measure is also important, not only from the capital cost standpoint, but ongoing operations and maintenance and the staffing that would be required for a mitigation measure. And I probably should back up, but when we talk about mitigation measures, we're talking about both structural and regulatory changes. So, example of a regulatory change would be updating land development regulations or small wastewater facility regulations, or potentially incorporating a aquifer protection overlay into the land development regulations. And then structural that's where we're getting into, like, maybe it's smaller package systems in certain locations, or a regional system. And there's lots of ways we can look at this. So anyway, these are the criteria we're thinking about using to evaluate potential mitigation measures. And I guess the next step, I was just going to kind of explain what our initial process would be, or our thoughts on what our process would be in doing the evaluation. But before I move on to that next slide, I guess I'd be curious, are there any other criteria that maybe we should account for when we're evaluating mitigation measures?
I would just say, again, we don't have the phrase cumulative on there. So, looking again, you could look at one project and it might meet all the check marks on your strategy. And yet if you're not taking into account the cumulative impacts from other treatment options in other places, it might not meet the mark.
No, that's a good point, Carrie. Thank you. And I almost think we might be able to incorporate that either as its own, or maybe we can incorporate it into the integration component or criteria.
It'll, total maximum daily load kind of analysis, right? Which we may end up having to do on Fish and Flat Creek, or we should be doing, is going to be a criteria, is perhaps a pathway to look at that kind of criteria.
Okay, sure. Any other thoughts?
Travis, this is Amy and Brad. We just thought, feasibility of how feasible in our location in the world can you do things?
Right, technical practicability.
Yeah.
Well, even implement, socially too. I mean, that's been brought up, but we can have a goal, but set it so high that you don't get a buy-in with everybody else. I mean, outside of our group, I've seen that happen many times, and you've set a high goal and a high standard, but when it's all said and done, it's not implementable, where maybe we need to look at baby steps to reach that goal and have that brought in to make it more implementable.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. So I guess I just wanted to kind of lay out our initial thoughts on how we would evaluate different mitigation measures. Obviously we're hoping to get your feedback on developing the screening criteria, and I think there were some great thoughts provided today. We're in the process of looking at existing conditions, and we're going to throw out some potential mitigation measures. Those are not the end all be all, but those are going to be some things that we think might be worthwhile to look at further in one of these reports that will be coming out to you before our March meeting. In that March meeting, we're also going to talk about some other mitigation measures. How can we solve the issue? And then after that meeting, we would we would conduct a screening of those mitigation measures based on the criteria that collectively has been developed. And then those screening results would be refined based on some input from our project team. So the county, Protect Our Water Jackson Hole, the town, and the conservation district. And then we would, potentially there may be measures that really need evaluated in much more detail. There probably be some measures that are lofty goals that might be challenging to evaluate. But we would do a detailed evaluation of certain mitigation measures to really rank them and figure out which ones are best to try to implement sooner rather than later. And then once we do that detailed evaluation and ranking, we would also get some input from the project team. And that would be our ultimate final mitigation measure ranking, is how we scored them in the end in consultation with the project team. So, and then those measures will get incorporated into the master plan, where we'll, try to identify, funding sources, identify the schedule of when they'd be laid out or implemented, and then also identify who's going to be responsible for implementing the mitigation measures. So back to James's point earlier about the responsible management entity, I'm really curious to look into that more, because that may be something we think about. But with that, Sarah, that was pretty much what I had. I guess we're open for some more discussion if folks want to weigh in.
Yeah, feel free if you have any questions to raise your hand again. I just want to conclude by thanking you for your attention and your time this morning and your substantive discussion. I think we're all looking forward to some ideal outcomes, and you are certainly driving that with the quality of your participation and attention. If there's anything we can do to make the ride smoother or better, let us know. Let Ashley know, let me know, let Travis know. Check out the chat question or comments. If you're not getting project updates or the newsletters, Ashley posted in chat how you can sign up for that, or just put your email in there and we'll make sure that you get it. Otherwise, I just want to make sure I'm not getting any questions, and I don't see any. Chris.
Hey, Sarah. One quick question. I think we discussed this yesterday with the other group, but we chose to use Zoom for this format today, and it looks like we have had really good quality feedback and discussion here today and attendance. But want to pose the question of if this platform works for most people, or do we want to try to have an in-person meeting? There is value for sure sitting around the table and hashing out through some of these ideas, but just want to see what folks think. Thanks.
Thank you for reminding me, Chris. Travis, if you would take that last slide down, I'll be able to see those of you who find this option of Zoom to be more convenient or prefer to keep the next meeting to be Zoom. Please raise your physical hand or the hand icon. Okay, just giving you a chance. Got it. Okay. And great. Now take those down, people. And I just want, are there any of you, and voices welcome too, but who would really want to have us meet in person? Okay. I see maybe one, and that might be a leftover. Here's the deal. We'll continue with Zoom, and you've got my email. You've got, hi, James, I see you. All right. I like people too, but not all people. I like this group. We will probably do Zoom next time because the turnout was so great, and I'm just getting an assessment of the hands. Please reach out to Ashley or to me or Chris if you feel really strongly. And as the seasons change, summer might be a little bit easier to find a nice meeting place, even in a park or something like that for a discussion. We'll try to, Chris tried to get us on a float trip last year, and we're still game for somebody who wants to organize that. But Chris, I think we decided it wasn't Sarah. It's not Chris. We're not cut out for that, are we, Chris? But other than, I know this poses some challenges, but it sure has been nice to see so many people attend, and we don't have to etch anything in stone. We'll probably do the next one on Zoom, and hybrid. I see Tanya suggesting that could work really well too. So thanks for that. I don't have anything else. I don't think Travis does either. Going once or twice.
No, I just want to thank everyone for their participation. And I think one of the things I took away from today was it seems like the sense I get is everyone's wanting to look forward, and let's maybe not focus on the past so much. So that's great to feel, at least from my standpoint. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes. All right. With that, this meeting is concluded. We'll see you next time. You have our great thanks, and hope you have a good day and enjoy some sunshine.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.